Is this yours? Pregnant black woman asks millionaire. But the reward surprises her when Keisha Williams saw the Hermes leather wallet fall out of the bag of the black executive who had just left Whole Foods in Atlanta. Her first instinct was to look around to see if anyone had noticed. At 19, she held her 6-month-old son Jaden in her arms as she counted the last $15 she had to buy diapers and formula. The wallet looked expensive enough to solve her problems for months. The woman who had dropped the wallet walked confidently toward a black Tesla Model S, talking on the phone with the authority of someone accustomed to making million-dollar decisions. She was elegant, probably in her 40s, wearing a suit that cost more than the annual rent for the apartment where Keisha lived with her grandmother in East Atlanta. Her posture radiated the kind of success Keisha had learned to recognize but never expect for herself. Keisha looked at Jaden, who was starting to cry from hunger, then at the wallet on the ground. Inside could be hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars. Enough money to pay the rent that kept her up every night, to buy the medicine Jaden needed, to finally stop choosing between feeding her son or herself. Her hands trembled as she bent down to pick up the wallet, the weight of her desperate situation pressing against the values her grandmother Ruby had instilled in her. What Keisha didn't know was that the executive had stopped near the car, not just to answer the call, but because something about the young black mother she had seen in the parking lot had awakened a distant memory she couldn't quite place. There was something familiar about the way the girl held her baby, the quiet determination in her eyes, that made Victoria Mitchell look twice through the rearview mirror. "Excuse me," Keisha shouted, running across the parking lot with Jaden safely in her arms. Victoria turned, seeing the young woman approaching with something in her hands. For a moment, her expression hardened, the automatic reflex of a successful woman who had learned to be cautious of unexpected approaches. But when she saw what Keisha was holding, her expression changed completely. "Is this yours?" Keisha asked timidly, holding out the expensive wallet. "It fell out of your purse when you left the store." Victoria took the wallet slowly, her eyes studying Keisha's face with an intensity that made the young woman feel uncomfortable. There was something in the executive's gaze that went beyond surprise or gratitude. It was recognition mixed with something that seemed suspiciously close to shock. "My God," Victoria whispered, her professional voice speaking for a moment. What's your name?" Keisha hesitated, uncomfortable with the intensity of the scrutiny. "Keisha Williams, ma'am. Are you okay?" Victoria continued to study her face, noticing details that made her heart race. The shape of her eyes, the line of her jaw, a small scar on her left eyebrow that seemed strangely familiar. What neither Keisha nor Victoria understood yet was that this chance encounter in the parking lot was not a coincidence, but the culmination of a search Victoria had abandoned years earlier. The wallet Keisha had returned contained not only cash and credit cards, but also photographs of a younger sister Victoria had lost when they were separated by the adoption system 20 years earlier. Victoria opened the wallet with slightly trembling hands, checking to make sure everything was there, but mainly to buy time while she processed the impossibility of what she was seeing. "Keisha Williams," she repeated slowly. "Are you from Atlanta? Have you always lived here?" The question seemed strange, but Keisha answered politely. "No, ma'am, I grew up in Augusta with my grandmother. I moved here when I got pregnant, looking for work." "Augusta," Victoria repeated, her breathing becoming shallower. Do you know anything about your biological family?" The question hit Keisha like an unexpected punch. "Why are you asking that?" she said, instinctively holding Jaden closer. Victoria realized she had crossed a line, but she couldn't stop. There were too many coincidences, too many details that lined up with the sister she had searched for 2 decades. If you're enjoying this story about life-changing encounters and unexpected family connections, subscribe to the channel right now, because what Victoria discovered about Keisha and what she decided to do with that information will show you that sometimes the simplest acts of honesty can bring together families that fate had torn apart. What made this moment even more meaningful was that Victoria had spent the last 5 years funding a program that searches for families separated by the adoption system, but had given up on finding her own sister after countless false leads. Now, the person she had been searching for so long was standing in front of her, having chosen honesty over desperately needed financial opportunity. The silence in the Whole Foods parking lot was broken only by the sound of Atlanta traffic in the background. Victoria held the wallet Keisha had returned, but her eyes remained fixed on the young mother's face as if she were trying to solve a complex puzzle. Keisha shifted Jaden's weight to her other arm, uncomfortable with the intensity of the scrutiny she was receiving for a simple act of honesty. "Sorry for the personal questions," Victoria said, trying to regain her professional composure. "It's just that you remind me of someone very important to me." She opened her Chanel purse and pulled out an elegant business card. "I'm Victoria Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Consulting Group. I'd like to talk to you about something important, if you have time." Keisha looked at the card, immediately recognizing the company name, one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the South. "Ms. Mitchell, I appreciate it, but I don't know what we could talk about. I just returned your wallet. Any decent person would have done the same." Her words revealed a natural dignity that contrasted sharply with her obviously difficult situation. Victoria watched the way Keisha held Jaden, with a protective tenderness that brought back painful memories of her own childhood in the foster care system. "Keisha, may I ask how old you are? And, do you have any memories of having an older sister when you were a child?" The question came out more direct than Victoria had planned, but she could no longer contain the growing suspicion forming in her mind. Keisha frowned, clearly confused by the direction the conversation was taking. "I'm 19, and why are you asking about a sister? My grandmother Ruby always told me I was an only child, that my parents died in an accident when I was a baby." But even as she spoke, something in her expression suggested that she had always questioned parts of that story, small inconsistencies that had never been adequately explained. What Keisha didn't know was that her grandmother Ruby had kept a secret for almost 2 decades. She wasn't biologically her grandmother, but a retired social worker who had taken in a child abandoned by the system. Ruby had always planned to tell Keisha the truth when she was older, but her early pregnancy and subsequent financial difficulties had made the moment never seem right. Victoria picked up her phone and navigated to a photo folder she rarely opened. "Keisha, I need to show you something. It may be upsetting, but..." She showed her a faded photo of 2 black girls, one clearly older than the other, both in institutional clothing that suggested an origin in the adoption system. "This is me at 14, and this," she pointed to the younger girl, "was my younger sister, Kesha. We were separated when she was 3. The blood drained from Keisha's face as she studied the photograph. The younger girl had her eyes, her facial structure, even the small scar on her eyebrow that Keisha had always assumed came from a childhood fall. This can't be real," she whispered, but her voice carried less conviction than her words suggested. "Kesha was her original name," Victoria continued, her professional voice now completely replaced by raw emotion. "When they separated us, we promised we would always find each other again. You had a blue teddy bear named Bruno that you never let go of." The words hit Keisha like shock waves. She still had Bruno, tucked away in the closet of the room she shared with Jaden. "I've been looking for you for 20 years, Victoria admitted, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I hired private investigators. I used every resource I've built up through my business. I always believed you were out there somewhere, but the system had changed your name, your history. And now you're here, returning my wallet when you could easily have kept it to feed your son." Keisha felt the world spin around her. For her entire life, she had felt a sense of incompleteness, as if an important part of her identity was missing. "If you're really my sister," she said slowly, "why didn't they ever find any records? Why didn't Ruby ever tell me?" Victoria shook her head sadly. The adoption system in the 2000s was chaotic. Many records were lost or deliberately obscured. Some well-meaning people, like your grandmother Ruby, took children in informally without going through official channels. Jaden began to cry again, bringing both women back to the present reality. Victoria watched Keisha calm the baby with practiced movements, seeing in her the same kindness and strength she remembered from the little sister she had lost. "Keisha, I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to know, regardless of whether we're biologically related, what you did today, choosing honesty when you're clearly struggling, says everything about who you are as a person." The parking lot around them continued with its normal movement, people entering and leaving the supermarket, cars arriving and departing, but for Victoria and Keisha, the world had stopped. They stood at the confluence between past and future, between loss and rediscovery, between desperate need and the unexpected possibility of transformation. In the days following their encounter in the parking lot, Keisha couldn't stop thinking about the possibility Victoria had presented. The faded photograph of the 2 girls remained vividly in her mind, especially since she had found Bruno the bear in the closet and discovered a faded tag with the name Kesha that she had never noticed before. But with Jaden to take care of and bills piling up, she didn't have the luxury of getting lost in speculation about the past. Victoria, meanwhile, had discreetly hired a forensic geneticist to prepare a DNA test in case Keisha agreed. During 20 years of building her consulting firm, she had learned to be methodical about evidence before making important decisions. But her heart already knew the truth. There was something about the way Keisha held Jaden, the cadence of her voice, the natural dignity with which she faced adversity, that echoed deep memories of her lost sister. The call came on a rainy Thursday as Keisha tried to calm Jaden in the small apartment she shared with her grandmother Ruby. "Keisha, this is Victoria. The lab results are in." Her voice trembled slightly, carrying the weight of 2 decades of searching. "We are sisters. You are Kesha Williams, my younger sister whom I have been searching for 20 years." The silence that followed was filled with the sound of rain against the windows and Keisha's heartbeat echoing in her ears. All her life, she had felt an indefinable sense of incompleteness, as if an essential part of her identity was missing. "Victoria," she whispered, trying out her sister's name like a long-lost prayer. "What does this mean? What do we do now?" Victoria had spent years imagining this moment, but she had never anticipated the real emotional complexity of finding her sister in such vulnerable circumstances. "It means you'll never be alone again," she replied, her executive voice replaced by the tenderness of an older sister. "But it also means we need to talk about how to make this work while respecting your life, your independence, your dignity." 3 days later, they met at Victoria's home in Buckhead, a Georgian mansion that represented decades of hard work and strategic success. Keisha arrived nervous, carrying Jaden and a small suitcase with her few precious belongings, including Bruno the teddy bear who had become a tangible bridge between her forgotten past and her present. The house was elegant but not intimidating. Victoria had deliberately chosen pieces that reflected warmth rather than ostentation. "Keisha," she said when she opened the door, "welcome home." Not my house, but home, a distinction that did not go unnoticed by Keisha, who had spent years distinguishing between places she lived and places she truly belonged. During the first few hours, they exchanged stories with the caution of strangers who shared DNA but no recent memories. Victoria talked about building her company from scratch, about the barriers she had faced as a young black woman in corporate consulting, about the lonely nights when professional success couldn't fill the void left by her lost family. Keisha shared her struggle to maintain dignity while raising Jaden alone, about fast food jobs that barely paid the bills, about dreams of education that seemed impossible when every dollar had to be stretched. "You know what impresses me most about you?" Victoria said as she watched Keisha interact with Jaden. "It's not that you returned my wallet, although that was extraordinary. It's how you maintain your strength, your kindness, your integrity even in the face of circumstances that would break many people. It reminds me of the brave girl I knew when we were kids." Victoria had spent the last few days developing not just a plan to bring their lives back together, but a strategy to empower Keisha without creating dependency. "I have a proposal," she said, picking up an elegant folder from her desk. "Not charity, not pity, but a genuine partnership based on what I've observed about your character and potential." The proposal was carefully structured. Keisha would move into the guest house on Victoria's property, providing independence but proximity. Victoria would finance Keisha's higher education, any field she chose, while arranging childcare for Jaden through the corporate child development center the company maintained. In exchange, Keisha would work part-time at Mitchell Consulting Group, learning aspects of the business while contributing perspectives the company needed about underserved communities. "Why would you do that?" Keisha asked, her experience with disappointment making her wary of offers that seemed too good to be true. Victoria smiled, finally allowing years of longing to show in her expression. "Because for 20 years, I've built a successful career but never managed to build a family. And because I see in you the same potential that some people saw in me when I was young and vulnerable. The difference is that you won't have to do it alone." Try again 6 months after that transformative encounter in the parking lot, Keisha's life had changed in ways she never dared to imagine. The guest house on Victoria's property became her first real home since childhood, a space where she and Jaden had privacy but also the support of a rediscovered family. Keisha had enrolled in business administration at Georgia State University, attending classes during the day while Jaden stayed at the Mitchell Consulting Child Development Center. But the most significant transformation wasn't happening just in Keisha's personal life, it was happening at Mitchell Consulting Group itself. Victoria had quietly created a position for Keisha as emerging communities consultant, a role that allowed the young woman to apply her unique perspective on challenges faced by marginalized populations that many companies tried to reach but rarely understood authentically. During a crucial meeting with Coca-Cola executives about a campaign targeting urban communities, Keisha offered insights that left the room in reverent silence. "You're trying to sell to my community using language and imagery that shows you've never really listened to our voices," she said with the quiet confidence she had developed. "Authenticity isn't a marketing slogan, it's a relationship built through respect and genuine understanding." The Coca-Cola executives not only accepted her recommendations in full, but asked Keisha to personally lead the implementation of the revised strategy. The resulting contract, worth $3.2 million, became the largest in Mitchell Consulting Group's history, and the campaign's success established Keisha as an essential voice in marketing to diverse communities. Victoria watched Keisha's growth with increasing pride and admiration. For years, she had built her company by focusing on corporate efficiency and process optimization. But Keisha's presence had introduced a whole new dimension: the ability to connect business strategy with real social impact, creating solutions that generated profit while simultaneously lifting communities. "You know what I've realized?" Victoria said during a family dinner at the main mansion, watching Keisha help Jaden with his dinner while simultaneously reviewing proposals for a new project with the Atlanta Housing Authority. "You haven't just found your place in our business, you've completely transformed our understanding of what business can truly accomplish." The project Keisha had proposed was revolutionary, using corporate consulting methodologies to redesign economic development programs in East Atlanta, creating sustainable pathways for residents to build wealth through entrepreneurship and homeownership. It was exactly the kind of initiative Victoria had dreamed about but never known how to implement effectively. 3 months later, when the Atlanta Journal-Constitution published a feature on rising stars in social business innovation, the cover photo showed Keisha holding Jaden as she stood in front of a new community development center she had helped design and fund. The article described how a young mother who had once struggled to buy baby formula had become one of the city's most influential consultants on community economic empowerment. But the real moment of culmination arrived when Harvard Business School invited Keisha to deliver a keynote address on authentic community engagement through strategic consulting. Standing on the same stage where Fortune 500 CEOs typically presented, Keisha looked out at an audience of future business leaders and spoke with a voice that carried decades of experience compressed into years of rapid growth. 3 years ago, she began, her voice steady and authoritative, "I was a teenage mother choosing between buying food for my son or keeping the lights on in our apartment. Today, I'm here because someone believed that authentic talent transcends circumstance, that true business innovation comes from including voices that have been systematically marginalized, and that the greatest ROI comes from investments in human potential." Victoria watched from backstage with tears streaming down her face, thinking about a little girl named Kesha who had promised 20 years earlier that they would find each other again. That promise had finally been fulfilled, but in ways more profound than either had imagined. Keisha hadn't just found her sister, she had discovered her calling, her power, and her capacity to create change that would benefit thousands of families facing struggles similar to the ones she had overcome. During the Q&A session that followed, when a Harvard MBA student asked about her secret to rapid success, Keisha's answer was characteristically thoughtful. "Success isn't about escaping your past circumstances. It's about using lessons you learned during difficult times to create solutions that prevent others from experiencing unnecessary hardship." True leadership comes from understanding that your individual transformation is meaningless unless it opens doors for others who are equally talented but haven't yet received opportunities to prove themselves. 5 years after that life-changing encounter in a Whole Foods parking lot, Keisha Williams Mitchell has become one of the South's most respected consultants on strategic community development. The Mitchell Consulting Group had evolved under her influence, transforming itself from a traditional corporate consulting firm into the nation's first company specializing in building sustainable bridges between private investment and real community empowerment. The company's main office, now located in the heart of Sweet Auburn, the historic district of Atlanta where Martin Luther King Jr. was born, perfectly symbolized the transformation Keisha had catalyzed. Instead of isolating themselves in corporate glass towers, they had chosen a renovated historic building that served as both an executive headquarters and a community resource center, where local residents could access free business training and economic development consulting. During the celebration of the revamped company's 5th anniversary, Keisha took the stage in the main auditorium holding Jaden, now an articulate 5-year-old boy who had grown up running through the hallways between high-level strategy meetings and community workshops. 5 years ago, she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had turned vulnerability into vision. "I was a young mother who had to choose between honesty and desperate need. Today, 847 families in Atlanta no longer have to make that choice because we've created systems that reward integrity while building real opportunity." The audience, a mix of Fortune 500 CEOs, community leaders, college students, and families who had benefited from the programs, erupted in applause that echoed beyond the auditorium and into the streets of Sweet Auburn. But for Keisha, the real moment of validation came when she saw Victoria in the front row, tears of pride streaming down the face of the sister who had bet everything on her potential when the world saw only her limitations. The Honest Returns program Keisha had developed became a national model for other cities. Based on the philosophy that personal integrity was the most solid foundation for community prosperity, the program rewarded small acts of honesty with opportunities for skill development and access to capital. Young people like her, single mothers, struggling students, underemployed workers, received microfinance, mentoring, and educational pathways in exchange for consistent demonstrations of character and community service. What we discovered, Keisha explained during her presentation, is that when you invest in people who choose to do the right thing even when it's costly for them, you're investing in the future leaders who will transform their communities from the inside out. Authenticity can't be faked, integrity can't be manufactured, but it can be recognized, cultivated, and leveraged to create systemic change. Victoria watched her sister command the room with natural authority, thinking about how a lost wallet had become the key to unlocking not just a family reunion, but a completely new approach to business that prioritized profit with purpose. The company's financial success had grown exponentially. They were now managing over $50 million in community development projects. But more importantly, they had proven that doing good and doing well were not mutually exclusive. Keisha's story had inspired federal legislation. The Williams Community Investment Act, named in her honor, provided tax incentives for companies that demonstrated measurable community impact through authentic partnerships with local residents. Harvard Business School had created a permanent case study on the Mitchell Consulting Group, and universities across the country now offered courses in dignity-based development strategy, based on the methodology Keisha had pioneered. But the most meaningful moment of the celebration came when a young Latina mother approached Keisha during the reception. "Miss Williams," she said shyly, "my name is Maria Santos. 6 months ago, I found a lost purse and almost kept it to pay my rent. But I remembered your story and decided to return it. The woman whose purse I returned turned out to be a bank executive who offered me a job in the customer service department. Now I'm saving for college, and my son has health care for the first time." Keisha hugged Maria, seeing in her eyes the same mixture of hope and determination she had carried during her own darkest moments. "Maria," she said softly, "you didn't just return a purse. You proved to yourself that you are someone who makes choices based on character, not circumstance. That's a foundation that no one can take away from you." That night, as the family, Victoria, Keisha, and Jaden, relaxed in the mansion that now truly felt like home, they reflected on the journey that had brought them together. "You know what still amazes me?" Victoria said, watching Jaden play with an educational tablet that tracked community service hours for young children. "It wasn't chance that you found my wallet. It was character. And character is exactly what our world needs most right now." If this story of transformation through integrity touched your heart, if you believe that small acts of honesty can create ripple effects that transform entire communities, subscribe now and share in the comments your own experience about how doing the right thing led to unexpected opportunities. Because the biggest lesson in this story is that when you choose dignity over convenience, when you maintain your integrity even during hardship, you're not just changing your own life. You're building a foundation for others who will follow your example, proving that sometimes the most powerful revolutions start with a simple decision to do what's right.